Secretary, the chair now tongue-tied. The chair now recognizes Mr. Yakym.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, it's good to see you.
Likewise.
As you know, the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, or IJA, expanded discretionary grant funding by 500%. But as you and I discussed on a recent phone call, on a per capita basis, Indiana ranks dead last in being able to secure IJA discretionary grants. And when I say dead last, I mean we're behind all of the U.S. territories as well. That's tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars in foregone projects to improve Hoosier communities like your former stomping ground of South Bend and across the entire state. Can you assure me that you'll work toward a more equitable distribution of IJA discretionary grants?
Well, thank you. Yes, we want to make sure that every state, including Indiana, where and your district, where I spent the majority of my life, get a fair shake in these processes and welcome opportunities to work with project sponsors who came close but didn't quite make the cut on how to refine their applications for future rounds.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. This May, your agency was the victim of a cyber attack that compromised personally identifiable information of 237,000 current or former federal employees. At a June briefing in this room, I was asked with your CIO, and I raised specific questions about the DOT's cyber modernization plan, including what the plan is, as well as funding and staffing needs. Your CIO committed to providing this information, but yet over 90 days later, we haven't yet received it. Can you commit to providing a written cyber modernization plan, budget request for additional resources, and an update on the DOT's response to this breach to this committee within the next 2 weeks?
Thanks. Well, our cyber activities with regard to the budget side will be contemplated within the President's budget request. As far as an update, certainly we'll work to make sure you get the information you need. I've been working with OCIO on not just the response to that particular incident, but the outlook going forward. A lot of activity on this, and I want to make sure you and your colleagues are well informed on the progress there.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Turning to another topic, you help run the administration's Supply Chain Disruptions Task Force. Is that right?
Yes, I'm a member of that.
Great. Let's talk about drayage trucks, which haul shipping containers between ports, rail yards, and distribution centers. I think it's fair to say that these trucks are part of the linchpin of our nation's supply chain. Do you generally agree with that?
Absolutely.
In that case, I want to flag something for you that seems like a major supply chain disruption that's brewing. Beginning January 1st of 2024, in just over 3 months, California will require drayage fleets to purchase only zero-emissions trucks. Let me ask, do you know how many zero-emissions Class 7 and 8 tractor trucks and terminal tractors were on the road statewide in California at the end of 2022?
I know that this is a very new technology, so you're not going to see a lot of them deployed just yet.
Yeah, so there's only 100, you're right, it's not a lot. It's 192 that were registered in the entire state, and they're all electric. But the ports of LA and Long Beach, two of America's busiest ports, require thousands of drayage trucks to move products through our supply chain. And an official in the port actually estimates that roughly 1,500 to 2,000 drayage trucks serving LA, Long Beach are retired every year. Given that there are only 192 Class 7 and 8 electric trucks across the entire state of California, do you think that all 1,500 to 2,000 drayage trucks will be able to be replaced with electric vehicles next year per this new mandate?
So as a department, we've not created a formal assessment of whether the industry will be able to meet the compliance timeline set forth by CARB, but we certainly recognize that that represents an aggressive transition. We've been in dialogue with the port directors about the efforts to comply there. I do think there's great opportunity for the EV use case in the drayage context because you often have predictable, defined, and relatively short runs. But that doesn't mean all of that technology is immediately available, and certainly something that we're monitoring, though we don't have direct authority to tell the state what to do in that regard.
So while the federal government may not have direct authority to tell the state what to do, this California mandate to move to zero-emissions vehicles with drayage trucks is a mandate that was enabled by a waiver from the Biden administration. Do you support that waiver?
Well, certainly we stand by any regulatory action we've taken in this regard.
And if we allow them to continue down that path, but the trucks simply aren't available, how does that help enable the supply chains that my constituents depend on.
Well, again, I don't have a formal assessment of how the compliance path is going. I know that it's going to require aggressive action. I also know it's going to lead to fewer cases of asthma in and around those port communities, in addition to the other benefits that are going to come from that reduction in pollution. So, certainly there's an important policy goal at stake here. We'll do everything we can to support it being compatible with another important policy goal, which is smooth and effective supply chains in the U.S.
Right. Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Yakym. The chair now recognizes Mr. Garcia.
Thank you, Chairman and Ranking Member. Secretary Buttigieg, great to have you here as we approach the 2-year mark of passage of the IIJA. And as you have